Its chapter discusses institutional corrections, noting that both our criminal justice and correctional systems have roots in English and European traditions. The text begins with an overview of these historical influences. This video introduces the first 5 of 9 learning objectives for this chapter. They are: 1. Summarize the purposes of confinement in Europe before it became a major way of punishing criminals. 2. Describe how offenders were punished before the large-scale use of confinement. 3. Explain why confinement began to be used as a major way of punishing offenders in Europe. 4. Describe the recent trends in the use of incarceration in the United States. 5. List some of the characteristics of the incarcerated population in the United States. Institutional confinement, used for punitive purposes in Europe from the 1600s to 1700s, and in the U.S. from the 1800s, existed earlier mainly for non-punitive reasons such as 1. Detain people before trial. 2. Hold prisoners awaiting other sanctions such as death and corporal punishment. 3. Coerce payment of debts and fines. 4. Hold and punish slaves. 5. Achieve religious indoctrination and spiritual reformation, as during the Inquisition. 6. Quarantine disease, as during the bubonic plague. Early punishments focused on inflicting pain and public humiliation, targeting the offender's body and property through fines, confiscation, and corporal or capital punishment, such as beheading, stoning, hanging, and flogging. Modern incarceration shifted away from these violent methods, aiming instead to reform offenders in private settings. Early punishments aimed to inflict pain and were often public to shame offenders and deter others. Banishment forced individuals out of their communities, while transportation sent them to colonies. These practices preceded long-term incarceration. The modern U.S. prison evolved from European workhouses or houses of correction, where offenders were taught discipline and work habits. Criminologists Graham Newman and Pietro Marangiu argue that Cesare Beccaria's On Crimes and Punishments, 1764, compiled reformist ideas from thinkers like Montesquieu and Voltaire, emphasizing proportional, certain, and swift punishment to deter crime. John Howard's The State of the Prisons in England and Wales, 1777, based on his European prison visits, called for safer and more humane penal environments that not only punish, but also discipline and reform inmates. Penology, the study of prison management and offender treatment, was shaped by Jeremy Bentham, who designed the panopticon, a round prison enabling constant observation from a central tower to promote order and reform. In colonial America, penal practices were informal, decentralized, and lacked systematic structure, combining private retaliation with fines, banishment, corporal punishment, and capital punishment. Pennsylvania and New York led the penitentiary movement by introducing 2 distinct confinement systems. The Pennsylvania system mandated solitary confinement, encouraging inmates to study religious texts, reflect on their actions, and engage in handicraft work. In contrast, the New York or Auburn system provided opportunities for inmates to work and dine together in silence during the day, followed by solitary confinement at night. The Auburn system became predominant due to its mitigation of the psychological detriments associated with complete isolation, efficient use of space, and compatibility with emerging factory models. Reformatories emerged as specialized institutions for younger offenders aged 16 to 30. Structured on military discipline, these establishments emphasized educational and vocational training alongside labor. Parole or early release was contingent upon demonstrable progress in rehabilitation, reflecting the move towards classification and recognition of diverse inmate needs. The reformatory movement contributed to the development of women's correctional facilities. The first women's prison based on this model was established in Indiana in 1873. Irwin identifies 3 dominant types of prison institutions over the 20th century: The big house prevailed during the initial decades. The 1940s and 1950s saw the rise of correctional institutions influenced by medical paradigms, leading to the adoption of a medical model, where crime was regarded as symptomatic of a condition requiring treatment. During the 1960s and 1970s, critiques regarding the efficacy and equity of mandatory rehabilitation shifted focus away from these correctional institutions, paving the way for the emergence of the contemporary violent prison. Established under the Three Prisons Act of 1891, the federal prison system came under the oversight of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, BOP, in 1930. Stability in the federal inmate population persisted from 1940 to 1980, while facility numbers increased substantially due to a shift towards smaller, more specialized institutions. Between 1980 and 1989, the federal inmate population more than doubled, primarily attributed to enhanced law enforcement and legislative changes, and doubled again in subsequent years with greater emphasis on combating drug offenses and illegal immigration. Privatization has become a significant alternative to traditional incarceration, with private entities managing prisons and other correctional facilities at various levels. Private contractors now operate state and federal prisons, juvenile institutions, local jails, detention centers for federal agencies, and correctional facilities internationally. This sector generates considerable revenue, often with limited oversight. Advocates of privatization cite improved efficiency, flexibility, and cost savings, whereas critics raise concerns about liability, the potential for profit-driven incarceration, and the tendency to reduce inmate services to maximize profits. From 1925 to 1972, the incarceration rate in the United States remained largely stable. However, each year from 1972 through 2008 saw a consistent increase in this rate. Between 1980 and the end of 2009, the adult prison population, including both state and federal facilities, more than quadrupled. By year-end 2017, approximately 1.5 million individuals were incarcerated in state and federal prisons across the United States and its territories. This figure encompassed 121,420 prisoners in privately operated institutions and 80,917 prisoners in local jails or facilities managed by county or local authorities. In 2017, aggregate spending on state and federal corrections was estimated at $66.7 billion. The Federal Bureau of Prisons allocated about $6.9 billion, while the 50 states collectively expended roughly $60 billion. The District of Columbia's expenditure stood at approximately $248 million. California led all states in correction spending at $13.5 billion, which was nearly 3.5 times that of Texas, the next highest spender. Overcrowding has been a persistent concern in American correctional institutions, exacerbated in recent years by prison construction lagging behind population growth. At the close of 2017, 13 states and the federal prison system reported operating above 100% capacity, a reduction from 18 such jurisdictions in 2015. Multiple states have at least one facility under court mandate to address overcrowding, while some operate under system-wide orders. On May 23, 2011, in Brown v. Plata, the United States Supreme Court ruled that California's prison conditions had resulted in avoidable suffering and fatalities. A significant majority of inmates in both state and federal systems are male, resulting in substantial overrepresentation relative to the gender distribution in the general population. Non-Hispanic Black individuals and, to a lesser degree, Hispanics are also disproportionately represented in the prison population. Few inmates belong to affluent or middle-class backgrounds, regardless of racial identity. Nearly 60% of state and federal inmates are between 25 and 45 years old. Over half, 56.6%, possess less than a high school education, compared to approximately 9% among the broader U.S. populace. While nearly half of the country's population is married, fewer than 20% of inmates report being married. Professor Reese and I encourage you to study this material carefully. Understanding today's correctional challenges is the first step toward addressing them. These issues developed over time and will take time to resolve, one step at a time, like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. Have a great day.